Hi, people. So it looks like once again the issue of abortion has become a really volatile issue, if I could put it that way, in the United States public discourse because of recent developments at the Supreme Court. Now, this is not a subject I speak about very much. I think I've only made one other video on this, possibly two. And, I've got over 3,000 videos, and I think I've only made a couple of videos on the subject. There's a few reasons for that. Firstly, it's one area I really, really do understand both sides. I'm not going to say I'm completely 50-50 neutral, but it's something I do understand both sides, and I'll get into that in a little bit. The other reason is it's much, much less of an issue in the UK and indeed across Europe than it is in the United States. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that it isn't the sort of toxic sort of issue that really garners huge division. This is not to say that people in Britain and the rest of Europe don't have strong views on the subject. They do, but it just doesn't seem to be a political hot button issue in the same way. I don't know, that could be different in countries like Poland and Malta, which are more restrictive than other European countries. I don't know if it's more of an issue there. Certainly, there would be strong opposition to that. Um, but focusing on the United States, just looking at the bottom of the BBC article on this, I'll just paraphrase this. What's the current challenge to Roe v. Wade? The Supreme Court is considering a case which challenges Mississippi's ban on abortion after 15 weeks. If the court rules in favor of Mississippi, it will effectively end the constitutional right to an abortion and make abortion rights a decision for individual states once again. There are 9 judges on the Supreme Court, 6 of whom were appointed by Republican presidents. A draft opinion from one of these, Judge Samuel Alito, has been leaked and contains a comment that the Roe v. Wade judgment was egregiously wrong. If the Supreme Court strikes down the 1973 ruling, then abortion could be banned in almost half of US states. So almost half, it's not nationwide. There will be liberal democratic states that will, the situation's not really going to change. But I think this is going to be affecting more red states where there will be legislators who want to overturn Roe v. Wade. Um, it's almost strange talking about Roe v. Wade because it's very much part of American discourse. But it is an important issue. So this is how I see it. Um, I think, like I say, it's one of those issues I don't have strong views on. Not because I don't think it's important, but because I can't feel very strongly one side or the other because I understand both sides. So looking at the pro-choice side, the whole narrative is it's about a woman's right to choose and it's about women's rights. And there's cases, for example, the commonly cited incidents are rape and incest. If a woman has been a victim of those crimes, then the idea that she should have responsibility for bringing up that child, she might not have the economic means to do so. As the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, this often disproportionately falls on lower income women. I'm very sympathetic to that. Why should a woman who's been the victim of rape take the responsibility? It should be um, that's something I can totally understand. Cases of incest, there's obvious problems with the baby then having developmental problems and all sorts of issues associated with that. Um, I think the UK situation, in England and Wales, I think it's similar in Scotland. I'm not sure about Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland's likely to be more conservative, but I would say our current situation is probably about right, insofar as abortion is legal in this country as it is in much of the world, much of the liberal democratic world, however, up to a point. I do not agree with abortion, say a week before the baby is due. I think it is a reasonable argument to say that yes, there's this issue with the woman's health, with rape, with incest. And in terms of the woman's health, that could be a factor whereby actually delivering the fetus could endanger her health. So I'm certainly on board with that in terms of the pro-choice side. But I do think that there is this kind of weaponized semantics, if I could put it that way, And what the pro-choice side does is they frame the whole thing as about women's rights, which in turn sort of disregards that the fetus could be female. 50% roughly of fetuses are female. Um, a friend of mine, I don't really know his views on the matter, but he posted a picture of a fetus. Um, now this was not just mush, as I heard someone once describe that as. This was a baby, basically, in everything but name. Um, I think that the science is a major component of this. And it's often framed as a debate between the religious right and those who believe in women's rights. But science has to be a key factor of this. For example, at what point are organs fully developed or almost fully developed? The brain, the heart, liver, and so on. That picture, it certainly was not mush or a collection of cells. That is a little human. Okay, so when the pro-life side says it's baby killing, I don't necessarily agree with the rhetoric, but I understand where they're coming from. What they're saying is you can't just dismiss this as a bunch of cells. There is something there, especially when the organs are largely developed. So I think legislation that recognizes that is valuable and reasonable. The other thing the pro-life side would say is framing it as anti-women or anti-female ignores the fact that half of fetuses are female, and many of the most outspoken critics of abortion are women. Okay, they might be religious women, but I think it's a little bit simplistic to label it as the religious right versus women's rights. I think there's more components to it. For example, scientific development. And the ratio of gender with fetuses. You also get situations such as in China where there have been examples of forced abortions. Now, what about women's rights in those cases? Those people who are talking about the right to choose, will they condemn that? And I know the current issues about the United States. Having said that, I do think the religious right can be quite dogmatic and blind to the plight that um, young women often face. This idea, well, it's still alive, so you should bring it up. They also can be overly simplistic. They say, for example, I heard a preacher, not directly, but on a YouTube video here in the UK, and it was out of Hull or Leeds, saying that if a woman's been raped, she can still put the child up for adoption. Well, it's not that simple. That's a complicated process. It's, and again, it's putting the responsibility on the woman, not the rapist. Um, So this isn't a motive issue, but I think that, smearing anti-abortion people as anti-women or smearing pro-choice people as, baby killers, that sort of rhetoric, although I understand it's a motive, it doesn't really help. And I think that both sides do things that don't help. For example, on the pro-choice side, when they talk about a fetus which has largely developed organs as much, I mean, I literally heard someone describe it as that. Excuse me, once. I just think that's really ins insensitive. It's really actually quite extreme. Um, I mean, when we're talking about emotions in this, those who are pro-life, and I'll get into that label in a minute, but they genuinely believe there is a mass murder going on of thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of babies. So of course they're going to have strong views on that because that's how they see it. I'm not saying I agree with them. I don't think an early stage fetus can be seen as a baby. Um, I think only late stage, like very late stage. But that's how they see it. I don't think they're motivated by hatred of women. I think they're motivated by, as they see it, they're disgusted at this idea that babies are being killed. Um, so the problem is because this is such an emotive issue, it's difficult for both sides to kind of get into the way of thinking of the other side. And then, of course, the pro-choice people, what they see is religious hardliners restricting women's rights. In fact, Roe v. Wade, as I understand, that initial case was about the privacy of the two women involved. Roe was a pseudonym. Um, I think that it's always going to be a very emotive issue, even if the pro-choice people had their way and this wasn't overturned, and every all 50 states had exactly what they wanted. Well, you're going to have the pro-life side saying this is an abomination because babies are legally being killed. That's how they see it. Again, I'm not saying I agree with them, but I think by nature this will always be an emotive subject. I don't think it's something that can be, if you have strong views on this issue, unfortunately, it's something that if you're on the losing side, it will always be emotive. Um, but I do wish both sides would be a little bit less dogmatic in the way they vilify the other side. I'm not saying they should agree with the other side, but you can't smear all pro-life people as hating women, and you can't smear all pro-choice people as baby killers. I would say, though, I have to be honest, when it comes to rhetoric, from what I've seen, the pro-choice side, the pro-life side, most of them don't talk about women as baby killers. Most of them are quite moderate in the way they deliver the views. So, for example, these cases of extremists, religious fanatics who bomb abortion clinics, or who maybe stand outside with placards and harass women going in and send threats to the doctors performing those operations. I honestly think they're a minority. So, smearing the whole pro-life side as extreme religious fanatics, I think, is a lazy argument, and it's not fair. It's not true. I'm not saying they're right, but I'm saying, that sort of extreme component, I think, is a minority. I think most pro-life people recognize that, threatening women and doctors isn't the way to go about it. Um, I don't know if there's going to be any sort of unrest associated with this. So far, there's been angry protests. I don't know. I haven't followed it very closely. I hope it doesn't get toxic. I hope it doesn't descend into violence. Um, the Mississippi law, 15 weeks is, well, it's not very long. Um, that's quite early on in in a pregnancy. But the thing about, well, she can put the baby up for adoption if she's been a victim of rape. Again, that's not that simple. Adoption's a complicated process. And I do think the religious right, they disregard the weight of responsibility on a young woman. And it's not always because people are just promiscuous and sleeping around. Like I say, if a young woman's been a victim of rape, um, the idea that she should have the onus of responsibility seems very unfair. Um, and I think terminating a fetus at the early stage is I don't see how the religious right could have an issue with that when the organs are not fully developed. But I don't know. I mean, like I say, this is something I don't have strong views on. I see both sides. I think the UK legislation at the moment is broadly speaking right. I do think there is danger that when you ban abortion, then women who feel there's no other choice will go to unsafe practitioners, and then their health is at risk. And often they are lower income women. So having safe access to abortion should be an option. I would say this though. There was actually a Democrat president. I don't know if it was Bill Clinton or Barack Obama, but they said surely we can agree. I think it was Obama actually, when he was making those sort of great reconciliatory speeches that he made leading up to his presidency. Surely we can agree that we can respect women's rights whilst limiting the number of unwanted pregnancies. Now don't quote me on that. I think it was Obama. I might be wrong. Surely everyone can agree that there should be a reduction in unwanted pregnancies. I don't know how anyone could argue that is a bad thing. Surely that's something the pro-life side and pro-choice side would agree on. Um, I mean, no one wants an unwanted pregnancy. That's goes without saying. Um, Final point just on this issue of pro-life. Very often they tend to be conservative Republicans, not always, but they tend to be. And some will point out the hypocrisy in that they will also support the death penalty. Um, but is it that simple? Is it like, well, they're hypocrites because they're arguing for life, but they are in favor of the death penalty, or they're in favor of, for example, anti-welfare, they're anti lots of things. So they're talking about supporting life, but then when the life comes into being, they tend to be quite conservative on domestic policies that impact people's lives. To an extent, I see the hypocrisy in that. However, I think there's a difference between an unborn fetus or baby, I'm using both terms, versus someone who's committed a heinous crime and they've been sentenced judicially to to capital punishment. A 35-year-old man who's killed three people has made a conscientious choice to do that. That's very different from an unborn baby or fetus. So I think the comparison's a little bit flawed. However, conservative Republicans, I do think they can be kind of pretty much like my issue with conservatives here as well. It's kind of a survival of the fittest mentality. And it goes something like this. Oh, well, just through hard work, you could get what you want. So anyone who's struggling, it must be their own fault. They're lazy or they're just taking money from the government and so on. I do think there is a lack of empathy from conservatives. I think it's one of the biggest problems. I think there is a fundamental lack of empathy with people who are struggling because I'm not saying that's universally the case, but it is the message that they send out. I've got mine, and then you've got no excuse for not having yours. Sort of survival of the fittest mentality. It's one area I don't agree with conservatives on. I do think sometimes they lack empathy. And maybe that's true in the abortion debate because maybe they're not fully recognizing the plight of a young woman who doesn't have the financial means um, for all their methods. But I think everyone can agree there should be a reduction in unwanted pregnancies. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Let me know your thoughts. I hope I've articulated that I do see both sides. Um, Maybe it sounds like I'm a bit opinionated even on this, but I've tried to express how I do see both sides. I don't think that the pro-life people should, disregard the situation that young women are under. But I also think it's wrong for the pro-choice people to just vilify their opponents as hating women. I think that's a pretty overly simplistic argument, particularly when you consider that half of all fetuses are female. So, and I think the UK legislation, as I understand it, is probably about right. We allow abortion, but I think very late stage it's prohibited. I think that's probably the right ruling. And many, devout Catholics are very against that. But I probably veer slightly more on the pro-choice side, but I do understand the pro-life side. Okay, let me know your thoughts. And I just hope things don't descend into violence or anything like that.